You're listening to Northwood Church Matters, a podcast of Northwood Church in Evansville, Indiana, where we discuss why the local church matters and things that matter to the local church. I'm your host, Matt Higgins. Hey, well, welcome back to the Northwood Church Matters podcast. I am here to talk about Panama again. So 2 weeks in a row, we're talking about Panama, but I'm here this time with our missions pastor, Ryan Moore. And I'm here with Diane Edwards. See, she's been on the podcast before. She's kind of our mother of missions. And so she's been a lot of different places with us, and we're thankful for her. And this is how much I sacrificed to be here for this podcast today. I was eating at Jason's Deli, and I didn't even get ice cream.
Oh,
and so I came back to be with y'all. So
what a sacrifice.
It is a sacrifice.
Man.
In order to sacrifice that really yummy ice cream with the really yummy fudge.
That's right.
In order to be
We're
here.
thankful that you made that sacrifice.
We're thankful to be here with y'all. Well, can you give me a brief overview of what the mission trip to Panama looked like?
Yeah, it was a fun trip. It was really a joy to serve there. We had 5 people on our team go. Myself, Diane Edwards, Danielle Kibbe, all 3 members here at Northwoods. And we also had 2 people from Community Central, which was our church plant. They've recently constituted, so they're their own church. But we had 2 people from their church come and join us on this trip, Domingo and B. So Domingo is their worship leader, and B is a leader in the church. She does some secretarial work for them as well. But 5 people total going on the trip. 3 of them were Spanish speakers, and so that was really helpful. Domingo is Puerto Rican, so he speaks Spanish really well. Danielle Kibbe is a Spanish teacher at ECS, and B was raised in Panama. And so this was a neat trip for her, kind of a homegoing. Oh, it sounds like she's died. She has not died. Just homecoming. Maybe that's better. Maybe that's better.
Better than she's going home.
B is still alive, and we're grateful for that.
Yeah.
But Diane and I, we were the only ones who didn't speak Spanish, and so it really was just a helpful thing having speakers there to help us out with that. We worked with the IMB, and so the IMB has numerous missionary families that are currently stationed in the country of Panama in different areas. We flew into Panama City, spent the night, met some IMB personnel there, woke up the next morning, took an in-country flight to a place called David. We would say David, they say David, and drove from there north to a place in the Cherokee province, an area around Volcan, there's a volcano there. And really our ministry focused right around that area. And so it was cooler climate, which was really nice. Yeah, the cooler temperatures were nice. We weren't sweating the whole time, and able to do primarily evangelism. Did a lot of evangelism there in different ways, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a couple of other questions down. But primarily it was an evangelistic trip, and so we were able to share the gospel with hundreds of people over the course of a week. And so that was very fulfilling, very, very good trip.
Mm-hmm.
Diane, any overview from you?
Well, we met up with another team from South Carolina. They had 21 members. They ranged from 4 years old to probably middle 50s.
Mm-hmm.
So, and everything in between. But it was a blessing to serve with other fellow believers because we all have that one thing in common and that one goal. And the IMB missionaries that we met all along the path were awesome as well. So it turned out to be a really good trip.
Yeah. It's a lot of fun.
So what led Northwoods to partner with missionaries in Panama and specifically minister to the Neve people that are there?
Yeah. So this trip all came about primarily because Zach and Courtney Newsom and their boys are in process of transitioning from the States to Panama and serving with the International Mission Board. And so that's the reason why Panama is not only on our map, but in the days ahead is going to be a central focus to what missions looks like at Northwoods. Because if we're sending out our people to go and serve and to live and serve in other parts of the world, then we want to be very involved in wherever they are being sent. And so that's kind of what led us to partner with Panama. Just roundabout, we were going to Ecuador last year, and There was some political stuff and civil stuff happening there that ended up making us make the decision to cancel that trip. And we had some vouchers that were from that trip. And so a few people that were going on that trip, we were able to transfer those tickets over so that we didn't lose everything that we put down for that trip to going Panama instead. And so it kind of worked out where we needed to use the vouchers by a certain point in time. The Newsomes are going to Panama. It just made sense for us to, in this process of sending the Newsomes out soon, I guess they were sent out at this point, right? There's the last Sunday was with us this past Sunday. It made sense for us to go ahead and start taking proactive steps towards what does evangelism look like for Northwoods in Panama. That's kind of how that trip came about. The Nebe people that we worked with, that was an indigenous tribe that we worked with. The missionary couple that was logistically organizing everything for us, that's the group that they are ministering to right now and trying to reach with the gospel. And so we were able to, just because they have made connections and have national partners there in Panama and already have some ministry set up, it was a situation where we could just come along, plug into what they're already doing, and help strengthen that relationship, point them to local churches that already exist in those communities, just come alongside those missionaries and help them out.
Well, just a follow-up for y'all. So I know that in Ecuador, some of the indigenous peoples, they have their own language. So did the Neve people, did they speak Spanish or did they have an indigenous language?
They have an indigenous language, which is different from Spanish.
Mm-hmm.
So that's been a real challenge for the IMB missionaries there, Adam and Jessica, to learn their language as well as Spanish. And some words, like they don't translate. There's not an English translation for what the Neve people use. And we can talk a little later about like sin and doing wrong. They didn't have a concept of that, what that was. So it can be a real challenge working with that tribe.
Yeah. I remember going to Ecuador and going to an indigenous church, and like all those worship songs, it seemed like everything was consonants and no vowels.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And you're just there praising the Lord.
That's exactly right. Yeah. So what was one moment during the trip when you clearly saw God at work?
Well, I was thinking about that really hard because I was trying to narrow it down. There were just a multitude of times where I really saw God working. I think one that really touched my heart was when Domingo was witnessing. We went to one of the camps where these farmers and their families live, and they planned it so that we would be there when the men were coming home from work, from farming. And so Domingo had an opportunity to share the gospel with a middle-aged man. Just the look on that man's face, nearly tears in his eyes, as Domingo shared his testimony and then the salvation story. And it was just awesome to see that. And not just Domingo. I mean, so many times it was just such a blessing to see people using their words through Spanish in order to share the story of Jesus. So lots of times. Yeah.
The part of the trip that was most encouraging to me was I really enjoyed the opportunities to share the gospel myself. And I'm grateful for the Lord giving me those opportunities to do that. But really, the part of the trip that encouraged me the most was observing our people obediently sharing the faith with others and stepping out of comfort zones, being willing to just be uncomfortable so that these people could hear the message of the gospel. And so just seeing Diane and Danielle and Domingo and be faithfully sharing the word with folks, that's what was most encouraging to me if I had to pick one moment. I also thought about, at the end of the trip, you've shifted your mind to where, okay, ministry's over, it's time to go home. And I had done that. I'd made that adjustment. And on the last day when we were flying from Panama back to Atlanta, we were checking in at the airport, and the guy that was checking me in, his name was Reuben. My mind was not on how do I share the gospel with Reuben. But God kind of just opened some doors for that to happen. And I was wearing a shirt that had a verse on it. Reuben asked me, what does that mean? And I was able to talk him through what that meant. I was able to share the gospel with him at that point. To my knowledge, he didn't make a decision right then and there, but it was just a reminder to me that God is always at work around us, and we really don't know when opportunities to love others and to share the gospel with others is going to present themselves, and kind of a reminder to just always be ready and to share the hope of your salvation with others.
I was at the station next to Ryan, and so I heard part of the conversation. So I checked in before Ryan was finished, stood over to the side, so I knew what was going on, and I just stood there and prayed for that man. I didn't even know his name, but I just prayed that God would open his heart to hear what Ryan was saying and plant that seed. And when the Bible tells us to pray without ceasing, I think that's having a prayerful heart. And when you see something happening like that, to take that moment and lift that person up in prayer. So that was awesome. We really enjoyed the school, though, that we went to. And I have to toot Ryan's horn because he won't toot it, I'm sure. But we had the opportunity to meet with about 300 children. They brought them into us in groups of 100, and we split them into 3 groups. And our group decided that Ryan was going to share the creation story, which led into then the gospel. And bless his heart, he repeated it 9 times. So I have it down pat now. I still visualize him doing it. But just the way he used the children in the demonstration of the creation story, we all had a good time doing it as well. And just the look on some of the kids' faces of how they were really getting it, and enjoying it as well.
Were people generally open to spending time hearing the gospel?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I love my country. I love being an American, but I wish we were a kinder, gentler people.
Yeah.
I've been to Ecuador multiple times, and now Panama. The Latin American and the South American people are just so kind and so gracious as a whole. And when you come up to their home, they don't have the Ring doorbells that show, I'm not going to even go to the door because that's probably someone I don't want to talk to. These people open their home. You come in, and one woman that we met, Elizabeth, she had her little plastic stacking chairs, and she got them out and set them out for us as we had conversation with her. And then I was able to pray over her. It's just so much easier when we go to foreign countries just because of the way the people act. And so it's a great place to go and share the gospel.
Yeah, that is one of the more encouraging things about going to Ecuador is, for the most part, they listen to what you have to say. They may not all respond positively to the gospel, but they at least listen to what you have to say. That was very similar in this situation, very similar. They listened to us, would answer questions when we asked questions. They would ask some questions. And so in that regard, it was positive.
Good.
And when you asked them if they had anything we could pray for them, they always had something.
Yeah.
And multiple times it was to pray for their country.
Yeah.
And I just thought that was amazing.
Yeah, that was significant.
Yeah. So how did the trip stretch or grow your faith personally?
Well, every time I go on a mission trip, I come back with what I think is a closer relationship to the Lord. Not that it wasn't close before I went, but it's just something, what gets me the most, I guess, is like on Sundays when we go to the local church and they're singing songs of worship, and I don't even know what the words are, or sometimes not even the tune, but I look around and I see that we are all worshiping the same God. And that just does something to me. It's just awesome to know. We kind of think we live in this little bubble here in the United States, but there are people all over the world that are worshiping and loving God. And that just brings me a lot of joy.
There were some moments where the missionaries that we were working with, logistically, they really took care of us and lined out ministry opportunities for us to go and serve in, and that went really well. There were a couple of times, though, where we didn't understand exactly what was going to be taking place, and so we kind of had to, not last minute, but we would generally have 12 to 18 hours to prepare our minds and to go and do a certain ministry. But we didn't always feel as prepared as we would like to have been. But our team was super flexible and willing to be stretched in that way. They did a great job on figuring out what can we do. And the Lord really worked. Where you feel like you're weak and you don't have it all together, God just, when you're faithfully sharing the gospel with others, He just kind of shows up and He is at work in people's lives. And just a reminder of that, even when we don't have everything lined out and planned, that if we're willing to step out and to engage with lost peoples with the gospel, that God does a good work in that. And so that was stretching for me, but it was good.
Well, aside from Domingo, who's just a very fetching and debonair man, was there a particular person or conversation that left a lasting impact on you?
Oh, you have one.
Yes, I have one.
Is it Domingo?
No. Let's make that perfectly clear.
Yeah.
The first trip we made up the mountain, we went to a Nave residence,
Yeah.
homestead,
Yeah.
community,
Yeah.
whatever you'd want to call it. Very poor living conditions, as you can imagine. And we walked into the encampment, and this little boy, he was probably 5, saw me and just came running up to me and hugged me like I was some long lost relative that he hadn't seen in a long time. And I'm not sure why, of the 26 people there, why he picked me, but God just sent him my way. Again, I don't speak Spanish. I got his name, Samuel, and which would be Samuel here in English in the United States. He grabbed my hand and he took me over to where I'm sure that was his mother. I did get madre. I got that part. He had a brother, well, actually 2 brothers and a sister that were sitting there. The 2 boys, his brothers, appeared to have some type of handicap, special needs. But he, I'm sure, was telling me this was his mom and his brothers and his sister, and he was so proud. And then he stuck his foot out and pointed down to a shoe, and I noticed it was untied, so he was telling me to tie a shoe. So I did that. The whole time we were there, he would be playing in the activity or whatever, and he'd glance over to see where I was. Like he just felt like he had to keep an eye on me. So it was kind of sad to leave him when we left. I gave him a big hug and we left. And I'll be darned, the next day we went to a public school. This is where we had the over 300 children. And who do you think ran up to me and gave me a big old hug? But it was Samuel, and he was just smiling from ear to ear. He was pointing down the hall. I think he was telling me where his classroom was and that he was in school and that kind of stuff. And again, the other shoe was untied, so I had to tie a shoe. But I'll never forget that little boy. My prayer for him that I've been praying since I met him is that he will come to know the Lord. We certainly showed God's love to him. And they say we can share the gospel, and sometimes you don't have to use words. And I think that's my relationship with him, was that I was trying to show him Jesus's love and that he mattered and he was important, and all just by me showing love toward him. And I just pray that no matter what his life ends up, that he'll have God and Jesus in his heart. So he was precious.
Yeah, Samuel, he had you.
He did. Wrapped around his little finger.
Sure did. I met a young man named Joel, and Joel is Panamanian, so he's grown up there. His father was a missionary pastor. He's young, Joel is. He's 24. We had several translators that were very helpful to us when we were doing ministry. And Joel happened to be one of them. And he was just communicating to me during one of our downtimes, his calling, about his life, those kinds of things. And I was just encouraged in my conversation with him of the journey that God seemingly has him on right now. He is in process of becoming a missionary himself to another part of the country, to another opposite side of the country there in Panama, and is taking steps forward in that. And so I have been thinking about him regularly and praying for him, and have already taken steps in connecting him to some of the people that Zach Newsom's going to be working with when he eventually ends up on the ground, because what Zach Newsom's going to be doing is training up missionaries to be sent out to other parts of the world. And so there's just a really neat relationship that kind of started there, and I was encouraged to see how God was at work in his life. So
Good.
Really, I'm eager to see the future and see where he's going to end up.
Well, how did people respond to the gospel in all the different situations that you were in, whether homes or buses or schools or in English clubs that were there? How did people respond?
Yeah, they listened really well. And we had, I don't know how many decisions were made, but I'd say a handful of decisions, at least a handful of decisions were made in that. And so there was a positive response to listening to the gospel. I would say the fact that we had people respond in faith. We went to different places and did that. Like you mentioned, we did some door-to-door evangelism, did it there. We got on buses and We would just ride to a destination, and whoever we sat next to, we would share the gospel with on the bus. That was my first time doing that kind of evangelism. That was fun. That was more fun than what I was expecting it to be. I had a little bit of anxiety going into that, but it ended up being really, really good. The schools were very open to us coming and sharing the gospel, and the kids listened. There were jokers. Some of the kids were jokers, like in every school situation that you're going to see. And so not everybody was listening, but for the most part, they listened to the teachers and listened to us. And then we were invited to do some English clubs where we helped them practice English. And guess
that was easy.
That was easy, yeah.
English.
We could speak English, and we can share the gospel in that situation because they're just listening and they're trying to dialogue with us. And so those are some really interesting.
So I think it was the principal of the school that we visited that approached Domingo. She also taught an English-speaking class online. I think she had 21 students online. They were all adults that were trying to learn English. And she asked Domingo if she came to our hotel that night, could we speak to her class? And so we met up with her, as tired as we were. I think maybe some of us were hoping she wouldn't show up, but she did. And so it was a great time for a good hour and a half or longer. We were able to help them with their English words. And then the teacher is a Christian. And you could tell because then Domingo asked, can we share the gospel? And she said, absolutely. And she told the online students, she said, now listen, everybody listen up.
She did.
And he did a wonderful job sharing the gospel. And so that was a great experience. We didn't have planned, didn't even know that was something we were going to do. And it turned out to be a real blessing.
Yeah. I think Domingo would say that was one of his most favorite moments of the whole trip, was just kind of how that worked out and the opportunity to do that there. So,
yeah, I think a challenge for going to Latin America for any American is the flexibility aspect, that we're so focused on being punctual and being on time and things going as planned. In Latin America, nothing is punctual and nothing goes as planned.
That's right.
That's true.
That's right.
You've just got to be flexible.
Just roll with it.
Yeah. So what did you learn about the Neve people and their spiritual and cultural needs?
Yeah, you touched on this a little bit, Diane. Why don't you share a little bit about what you learned about the language aspect?
Well, we actually had a woman come from the tribe to talk to us. She brought her family with her father and mother and a brother and then a friend of hers. And she spoke about some of their religious beliefs. She showed us their native dress and some of the artisan crafts that they made and sell. She also explained to us, I can't remember all of her statistics, so I didn't write them down, but the Nabe tribe is the largest indigenous people in Panama. And I was looking online, reading up a little bit on them, and I found out that in 1997, which was not that long ago, is when Panama made this a huge area specifically for these indigenous people. And they have autonomy. They can do whatever they want in that land. And they don't answer like to local government, or there's no law enforcement kind of set up. And she gave us the example of, we talked earlier about how sometimes some of the words didn't translate. And one of the things that really concerned us was that they did not believe in wrong, like sin. And that's a hard concept, especially for us to grasp, because we thought, how are we going to share the gospel if they don't understand sin or you've done something wrong? Because in that tribe, she gave the example, if someone kills a family member, they just go out and kill the other from the other family.
Revenge.
I mean, it's just,
Revenge.
it's eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth. And that's how they live. So we found that to be very challenging to try to grasp that concept.
Yeah.
They are a kind people, though. I think they pretty much live in harmony.
Soft-spoken.
Very soft-spoken people.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was surprised to see that they're so, I can't remember the number she told us, but it's a huge population of this tribe.
Yeah. The sin aspect was really something we struggled with. I mean, all of us walked away from that conversation of, well, how in the world are we going to share the gospel with them if we can't get them to the point of understanding there's a need for the gospel? She did say that younger people in that population they would go to school. And so they would be able to speak Spanish, at least to some level. They would have some understanding of some English words and that sort of thing. And because they're culturally integrating with other groups of people, it's less difficult to share the gospel with a younger person of that people group than it is with somebody who's 60, 70 years old, that kind of thing. And so it was very interesting. I didn't consider that there were people that wouldn't have a word for something
For
that
sin.
we just, for sin.
That's wild.
For wrong, yeah. And so we were able to kind of work our way around it, in that if you are responding in revenge to somebody else because they did something to you, well, you're responding in that way because you don't like what was done to you. You would say that that is wrong, whatever it is that was done to you. So, well, that's what sin is. That's how we describe what wrong is. And so we were able to work it out a little bit, but yeah, it took a minute.
They seem to be very hardworking people. The farming, I didn't see any tractors. Now, the IMB missionary told us people with much larger farms, you will see some farm equipment, but all this was done by hand, and they would carry huge, I bet those were 50-pound bags of potatoes on their back, and they walk it down the mountain. So I think they're very hardworking people. It's just they don't have much in way of possessions to show for their hard work.
Yeah, that's right. You'll see this in Ecuador a lot of times when you're driving through and there's mountainous areas, but their farms were not on flat land like we have here. I mean, it was on mountains at like 45 and 50-degree inclines and stuff. And I'm thinking, how do you do that? But they're a very hardy people, hard workers. And so we were blessed to be able to interact with them and share the gospel with them.
Well, how can Northwood's Church's family continue to support the work in Panama, especially the Newsomes are headed out there? They're not quite there yet, but they'll be headed out there soon.
Yeah. How do you think, Diane?
Well, I think there's a lot of different things. Probably the first one that comes to mind is prayer, something everyone can do. Everyone in our church can be praying for Panama, the people of Panama. I think we can specifically pray for the Hussers, their work, Adam and Jessica. I kind of refer to them as like modern day hippies. I mean, they're so laid back. They have 5 children. They appeared to have a nice home, but he farms, and they have all kinds of animals. The little boy with his Christmas money bought an albino boa constrictor.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was our response too. Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They have tarantulas that they keep in cages, and and then every kind of little farm animal you can think of. But I think if we pray for them specifically in their work, and the people that work with them, the native people that are working alongside them, and giving. Northwoods, one of the best things I love about Northwoods is that we're so mission-minded in this church. And our members and those that attend prove that by giving to missions. Through the Southern Baptist, we have the Lottie Moon offering, and that's what supports these IMB missionaries. And so we need to be generous in our giving for them to have financial support as well. And then to lift the Newsomes up in prayer. This is going to be a big challenge for them. It's somewhat of a culture shock. I was blessed. I thought that we got to drink the water out of the tap because, when we go to Ecuador, we can't do that. But there were still some other cultural things that you have to get used to. And so I just think, especially with raising the 3 boys, that they're really going to need our prayer and support. And then lastly, I would say go. Go and be a part of it.
Yeah. This is a weird question that a lot of people considering going on a mission trip ask. What was the food like?
Oh, man. Every mission trip I go on, I think, I'm going to lose weight this week. I'm going to do so much walking, and I'm going to eat healthy food. And you do, for the most part. The sweet stuff you eat is fruits, fresh fruits and fresh vegetables and stuff, unless Diane keeps handing you these little caramel candies that she...
Carmelo.
They were pretty good.
So good.
Yeah. Food was great. Obviously, rice and beans and things like that, that's cultural for that part of the world. But I don't think we ate anything that was just...
Probably the little weenies we had for breakfast one morning with that sauce on them. That was probably the only thing that I didn't appreciate. And I did at one of the little grocery stores buy a little jar of Jif crunchy peanut butter. So on the fried bread, we'd put peanut butter.
We Americanized it.
We Americanized it a little bit. But no, the food was wonderful. Like Ryan said, the fruits and vegetables, you don't even know what it's like here in America to have those fresh fruits. papaya. I love papaya. I don't buy it here in the States because it doesn't taste like what you have down there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would say anyone considering going should not be the least concerned about not being able to eat the food because it was just wonderful. And like I said, in Panama, we were able to eat the greens and the fresh vegetables, which in Ecuador,
That's not always the case.
yeah, we weren't able to do. So,
Yeah.
it was
Food was good.
great. Yeah,
Food was good.
That's great.
Mm-hmm.
Well, tying into that, what would you say to someone considering going on a future mission trip with Northwoods to Panama?
Yeah, I would say go ahead and get your passport. If you're wanting some action steps, that's an easy one. Just get your passport so that you can be ready to go when we start asking for that. And that way you're placing yourself in a situation where you're ready to say yes to something instead of using the passport as a reason to not go. So I'd say get a passport. The next time we offer a gospel seminar, I would say go through the gospel seminar with us. We try to teach folks how to share the gospel and give them some practical steps in doing so, teach them a method to do that. And this past Sunday evening, I took a group of 7 people through it, and it was a fun time doing that. I would say go ahead and start sharing the gospel with those that are around you right now. Don't wait to be evangelistic when you go on a mission trip. Consider where you're at, that God has you there for a reason, and God has placed you in front of lost people every single day, and that's for the purpose of sharing the gospel with them. And so go ahead and start developing some evangelistic habits and routines in your life now so that when you do go overseas to serve on a short-term trip, it's not a completely new experience for you. So
don't let age be a factor because I'm old. I was the oldest one of the 26 people that were there in our group, but I think I kept up pretty well with everyone. So I don't feel too bad about that. But I just think that you need to listen to what the Lord is asking you to do. Because I struggled with that the very first time when Matt was leading the trip to Ecuador. And I said, well, I'm going to have to pray about this. I didn't even turn the paperwork in. I said, I'm really going to have to pray about this. And that was on a Sunday evening. And the very next Monday morning where I was teaching a new hire orientation, and there was a man in the class there who was Hispanic, and we struck up a conversation, and I said, well, I may have to learn Spanish. I'm thinking about going on a mission trip to Ecuador. And he said, that's where I'm from. And he said, oh, you would love the people. And he went on and on and on talking about his country. And I thought, well, Lord, take a baseball bat to my head. You're telling me. Yeah. He planted that man in that class to give me the confidence that I needed to listen to the Lord and to follow what I thought the Lord was leading me to. And I can honestly say of all the trips I've made, I will never sit back and say, gee, I really didn't think I liked that trip.
Right.
I mean, one has been a blessing after the other.
Yeah.
So go.
Well, very good. Well, thank you guys for taking some time out of your schedules, especially busy grandma schedule, to come and talk to us about Panama. And there'll be more opportunities to serve. So get your passport, go to the gospel seminar, and get ready to go on one of our mission trips.
Awesome.
We'll see you guys next time. Thanks for tuning in to the Northwoods Church Matters podcast. If you'd like to find out more about Northwoods Church, you can visit us at our website, www.northwoodschurch.org. Again, that's www.northwoodschurch.org.